Well, hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages as they arrive. Time then to see what is making the headlines with the Daily Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire, and the columnist for the article, Ali Miraj. Welcome to both of you. As ever, let's turn our attention straight to the front pages. And the FT then, taking in both big stories of the day. Their headline, Johnson adopts Plan B to check virus as anger festers over parties. The Eye reporting that Boris Johnson rushed forward new COVID restrictions in England after an outcry over Downing Street staff joking about breaching lockdown restrictions. PM taking the public for fools is the Metro's headline, which says the Prime Minister is facing growing calls to quit over an alleged Christmas party at number 10 and then announcing Plan B. The Daily Telegraph says Boris Johnson has told millions of people to work from home, yet said they can still have office Christmas parties, prompting suggestions that the new rules were illogical. The PM announcing new COVID restrictions is also on the front page of The Guardian, which also says Labour claims he's lost his moral authority as his government is engulfed in a crisis of credibility. And The Sun has Boris Johnson as the Grinch on its front page, with reports he's being accused of one rule for them, one rule for us. So, Kevin Maguire, Ali Miraj are here. Ali, thank you for stepping in at short notice as well. Much appreciated. Let's start with you then. To The Guardian, I guess. Plan B, the party scandal, both at the door of number 10. What a day.
Absolutely, Anna. Indeed, what a day. And I actually was, just before coming on with you, was at a dinner in the City of London, and I took a straw poll of the guests around my table, thinking that this Plan B announcement that was made by the Prime Minister only a few hours ago, what really led to this, and the consensus around my dinner table this evening, was that it was to distract attention from the Christmas party that allegedly took place last year on December the 18th. Now, this is the problem, because if the Prime Minister is announcing new measures, there are two issues that he faces. One is credibility with the public, which I think is really sadly now lacking. I mean, if we're all meant to be adhering to these new rules, and Plan B basically means the advice is to stay at home if you can from Monday, and also now bringing in vaccination passports in larger gatherings, making it mandatory to wear face masks even beyond what we're wearing now, people are going to think, well, hang on a second, it's one rule for us and it's one rule for those in power. And this goes back to the Dominic Cummings fiasco last year, and now we have this issue. And certainly, look, the Prime Minister's advisor has resigned today, but I don't think that puts a line under the story. So I think credibility is one issue with the public. And the other issue is that the Prime Minister's got problems with his own backbenchers. I mean, can you imagine being a Tory backbencher at the moment, having to be trotted out to defend this nonsense, only to have your legs cut from beneath you when policy changes all the time? So I think he's got problems on two fronts. OK,
where do you want to start? Which front do you want to start on, Kevin?
If we just stick with The Guardian for a moment, Anna, they do quite rightly point out that he's rushed forward these proposals on his Plan B. He's always dawdled and dithered in the past. And it's quite clear, as William Ragg, one of his own MPs, said at Prime Minister's questions, it's a diversionary tactic. He's brought it forward. And you could hear the concern in the voices of Chris Whitty and Patrick Vallance, the Chief Medical Officer in England and the government's Chief Scientific Advisor, that they worry people will not follow the new rules now because they think it's just Boris Johnson trying to distract attention from his problems over the party. And there is an element in that. Yet at the same time, those warnings from SAGE that hospitalisations from the new variant, the Omicron, could be 2,000 a day and overwhelm the NHS. You see why there is a need for restrictions, however illogical some of them are and contradictory, although others just bring England really broadly into line with Scotland and Wales. The fact is the Prime Minister acted politically to save his own skin after throwing one of his advisors under the bush because essentially he's been found out. And the Foreign Secretary, the Police Minister, the Health Secretary, the Vaccines Minister, all have been wheeled out in the past week to pretend there was no party and insist rules were followed. Well, if there was no party and rules were followed, why has he lost his former spokesperson? It is completely illogical and contorted, and Boris Johnson is in a serious mess here, and it's not over, and it's one of its own making, because he hasn't obeyed rules, and he's always tried to avoid honesty. And he's always tried to just talk or brazen his way out or lie his way out of problems. And I'm afraid, from his point of view, the country's wised up, which is why there are 2 polls tonight, finding more than half the country think he should go, and a sizable chunk of Conservatives are of that opinion too.
Yes, and we'll come back to whether the rules were followed and Allegra Stratton in just a moment. But on that issue of the diversionary tactic, I mean, the FT is another of the newspapers to conflate the Plan B and the party's issue together. Sage did brief the Cabinet on Tuesday, Ali, and gave warnings about this. And the problem with the exponential rise of a variant like this is it starts really slowly and can lull you into a full sense of security. And you look at the graph, it pops along until about December the 23rd, 24th, and it goes off like a rocket. And that's the danger, isn't it? That's why you heard people like Professor Chris Whitty saying we need to get ahead of it.
Well, and you also bear in mind what happened last year around this time as well, Anna, when Christmas effectively got cancelled for millions of people up and down the country that were very much looking forward to it. So it is a serious issue. However, the picture is mixed. It's still too early to really understand whether this virus is as virulent as its previous incarnations, Delta, Beta and others. We just don't know yet. And whilst it's true to say that certain other countries, Austria being a good example, which is effectively locked down, is actually going to introduce mandatory vaccination as of early next year. Germany now also considering doing the same and has also locked down parts of its own country. It's certainly true to say that certain countries are taking this very, very seriously. But look, scientific advisors have one metric and one metric alone, which is to prevent hospitalizations and deaths. That is the sole metric which they are judged by. The government has a much broader set of issues to deal with, including physical and mental health. We know that there is a waiting list at the moment, NHS waiting list of 5.8 million people, potentially could go up to 13 million, which would be absolutely staggering. And also, Rishi Sunak has got a £2 trillion pound public debt to deal with, and 400 billion of borrowing on the back of the COVID pandemic and the furlough scheme and other bounce back loan schemes, etc. So the government always has to look at this in the round and balance the risks to public health with the wider risks to not only the economy, but also physical and mental health. And it just seems to me that this has been rushed out. Look, to be fair to the Prime Minister, he wants to learn lessons from last time when he locked down. Last year was criticised for locking down late. But it just seems to me that this has all been rushed out today. And the one thing that the Conservative MPs that I've been speaking to over the last few weeks just wanted was for the government to get to Christmas without any further self-inflicted mishaps. We had the whole entire fiasco over Owen Paterson and the second jobs. We had the botched announcement over HS2. We had the ongoing issues with the migrants crossing and the death of 27 the other week. And all that they wanted was to get to Christmas without any more self-inflicted wounds. And unfortunately, this is what we now have, this party issue going on, and now potentially on the way to another lockdown. And there's a lot of resistance amongst some of the Tory backbenchers, including the COVID recovery group and others who feel uncomfortable. And Sir Charles Walker, who's a leading Tory backbencher, said, look, if the government wants to introduce new restrictions, that's all very well, but it should be purely on a voluntary basis on the back of the fiasco over this party that did or did not happen last December.
Many of the loudest voices are obviously per se against restrictions, aren't they? So that's the difficulty here. The Eye as well, Kevin, PM's 24-hour U-turn on COVID Plan B. Top of their front page 2 is a picture of a very tearful Allegra Stratton resigning, as we saw there, over the allegations of the party, which are now being investigated by the Cabinet Secretary. Plenty of questions that we still don't know the answer to. Who organised it? Who was there? Did it happen? What was the purpose of the gathering? You name it. You know, how and why was it first convened, if it happened? London went into Tier 3 on December the 16th. This is alleged to have happened 2 days later. And the rules specified that you must not have a work Christmas lunch or party where that is primarily a social activity. Is that word primarily the get out of jail card? Could that be the reason the PM can say no COVID rules were broken?
Yeah, he could possibly go down that route, but I think he would be then emphasising there's one set of rules in Downing Street for his gang and another set of rules for the rest of the country, because many people had Christmas parties cancelled. I had my work Christmas party cancelled. You don't have to get the violins out. It was just yet another one that went. So I think he'd be in serious trouble if he tried to pretend they were somehow exceptional and play it down. Because the eye pick up, just like The Guardian, that this is rushed. And I think you'd have to be criminally gullible to think the announcement would have been tonight on Plan B had the video not been leaked of Allegra Stratton joking and laughing about how to cover up for a party, because you could see a year ago they were already plotting the cover up, and that's what the whole point of the questions to get her answers were. How can you hide what has happened? And she's on a lot of the front pages, and she looks very, very, very tearful. I know her when she was a journalist at The Guardian, then she went to the BBC, then she went to ITV, then she popped over to the Treasury, worked for Rishi Sunak, then she was going to be the public face and voice of Johnson's government in that 2.6 million media centre. But like anybody who gets involved and gets close to Boris Johnson, you get burned. It always happens. He just ploughs on himself, and there must be other people in number 10 now frightened he's going to be chucking them under the bus as well. And the Metro front, the PM taking the public for fools, Keir Starmer will be thrilled that his line at Prime Minister's questions has been picked up on the Metro, and it's striking a chord with the population. It's not to say Johnson or the Conservatives couldn't bounce back some way in the future, but at the moment, Ali listed all those mistakes, sleaze, the Great Train Robbery, problems with people crossing the Channel. There's also the social care, I would say, a con, because some people will still have to sell their homes, and Labour's branded it a working class dementia tax. He's lost the magic. He's lost the touch. But it's the cover up. If when the Mirror had broken the story about the party last week, he'd say, "Look, we'll investigate. I'll see," and then he probably would have to admit there was a party and play it down. He would have taken some hits, but it just built up and up and up because of the ludicrous denials. Some people just were misled and then misled the public. Others lied. And it's come back and bitten them really, really big time. He's turned what was a problem into a huge crisis, which is now engulfing him. And it's going to be very, very difficult for him to shake off. And as he throws more people under the bus, what's going to happen in Downing Street, there are going to be more people who will leak against him and speak out against him, because they will see they've just been used and abused.
OK, we will talk more about this after the break. There's so much to discuss. Including those messages about working from home. Are they mixed? Christmas parties too? We will discuss that in just a moment. Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview. With me now, Kevin Maguire and Ali Miraj. Welcome back to both of you. We talked earlier about whether Plan B was rushed out as a diversion. Who knows? But the Daily Telegraph is certainly pointing to holes in it already, as many have. The headline says it all. Don't go to work, but do go to parties. That'll work then, Kevin.
Yeah, so I can go to my work Christmas party, but I can't go to my workplace to work. The contradictions are really glaring. For instance, you've got to wear a mask. You've got to show proof to get in, COVID jab proof or a negative test to get into a nightclub, but not a really crowded pub. You have to, excuse me, do this.
That's why you have to work from home.
Yeah, if I was at work, there'd be somebody rushing out doing the
exactly.
maneuver.
Yeah, you'd get a perimeter around you.
But you see those. There are contradictions now. If you could explain them by showing the impact of each action and how many cases of COVID it would prevent, then I think you could justify it. But just making the announcements without giving the data, I think is, again, going to undermine public compliance.
Well, The Sun, new curbs as PM reels over party do as I say, not as I Christmas do. You know, all over the front page. You can do as you please till you get found out. I mean, it goes on and on, doesn't it? Do you hope this isn't long-term damaging, Ali? Do you think for the Prime Minister himself, you know, that he has been held under the water effectively?
Well, I'm afraid it's too early to tell, Anna, whether it's long-term damaging or not. I mean, until now, the Prime Minister's get-out-of-jail card on the back of Dominic Cummings and that fiasco last year and various other mishaps has been that the Labour Party has been patently unelectable. Now, we know that governments lose elections rather than oppositions win them, although oppositions need to look credible, and certainly Keir Starmer's been trying to make efforts in recent weeks to try and make his front bench look more credible. And the one thing Keir Starmer's got going for him is he's not Jeremy Corbyn. So I think that the Tories need to be careful about this and put this complacency aside. There's a Comrades poll out over the last day or so saying that 66% of the British public want the Prime Minister to apologise for this supposed Christmas party that happened last year, with 50%, just under 50% of Tory voters also wanting him to do the same. And I was talking to various backbenchers over the last 24 hours who feel that they're being trotted out. One of them cited Geoffrey Household saying when he dug the knife into Margaret Thatcher when he resigned, saying it's rather like they're being sent out to go to the crease when the team captain's broken their bats before the first balls have been bowled to them.
OK, Ali, Kevin, thank you both very much indeed. Thank you.